All right, to be cognizant of everybody's time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Eder Casella Technology Tech Talk. In this month's webinar, we're going to be discussing all things Wi-Fi. So over the past couple years, most of us have probably been working outside of the office in some capacity. What happens if you connect to a free Wi-Fi? How do you troubleshoot connectivity issues when you're trying to do a webinar like this? And more. Today, we're going to be joined by partner Eric Vicencio. And should you have any questions throughout the presentation, just go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. And we'll also be recording this webinar, so you'll get a recording of this after if you want to go back or share it with other people. We're going to try and stick as close to 30 minutes as possible, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. As Rachel said, we're going to be talking about Wi-Fi today. I'm Eric Vicencio, for those of you that don't know me. I am one of the partners, and I'm the CIO here at Eder Casella Technology. I have over 15 years experience in IT. And I'll tell you that Wi-Fi comes up a ton. And we're going to go over some of the ins and outs and try to give you a good feel of things to look for, things to avoid, whether you're a company or you're an individual. We kind of geared this towards both because we do get individuals that are jumping on just to kind of get a good idea of what they should be doing as well. So jumping right in, let's talk about Wi-Fi security. Okay. So generally, when you go to set up a wireless network or you're jumping onto a wireless network, there's different types of encryption, they call it. And there's three here on this page, and we'll go over a couple of additional ones as well. Open, it's just that. It means anybody can jump on. Most modern devices, anything that has running like the newest OS, is probably going to give you a warning, and the warning for good reason. These networks, I generally tell people don't join them. They're not secure. They're not. There's no guarantee of your privacy while you're on it. Web networks, they're almost as bad as open networks. Most web, the definition of web is wired equivalency privacy. Wow, that's a tongue twister. But really, it's an old standard. It's been around for years and years, so it's very vulnerable. It's easy to crack, so attackers tend to like these networks when they find them. So I generally tell people, try not to use them. If you have the option at home between a WEP and a WPA, by all means, set up the WPA. WEP it takes someone with a little bit of knowledge. I think I can crack one of these in all of 5 minutes. So there's documentation out there for anybody on the internet to look at how to get into a WEP network. The good, though, is that it's supported by almost every device out there, whether it being like a smart TV or not so smart TV. Most of these devices will be able to join a WEP network. So for the little bit more security that you get from having a WPA network, which is Wi-Fi protected access, it's still way better. It's way harder. It takes more than 5 minutes. It takes me like 15 minutes to get into a WPA network, just because it's getting outdated and the threat actors are actually becoming smarter and they're able to get around it. The good thing about the WPA networks is they are generally supported by every device out there, but they're slightly slower. And if you're still working with old equipment that's WPA only, you're probably paying Comcast for over 100 megs, and you're only getting, and megs is how we rate the speed of your network. You are probably only able to utilize like 50, maybe. So it all depends. Now there's some newer standards, WPA2. Us in IT, we love our acronyms and we love to be creative with the way we name things. So Wi-Fi protected access 2, that's it. Very secure. If your router and your devices at home support WPA2, we highly recommend that you utilize this. It's also good to note that there's enterprise versions of WPA, and we can talk about that in a little bit here. Some, but not all hardware support this. If your hardware doesn't support it, it's time to upgrade. I hate to tell you that, but both on the router side and on your devices. So if you have an old laptop that's running your Windows 98. I know you love it, but it's probably time to get rid of it and jump to a Windows 11 device that actually supports WPA2. WPA3, again, being very original, is the Wi-Fi Protected Access 3. It's very secure. The problem that we're running into a little bit is not all of the hardware is up to the standard. There's still some that are being certified for it, but soon you're going to see this become the norm. WPA3 is much harder for an attacker to get into, and so is WPA2. WPA2, there's two types of encryption that are inside of the WPA, and I don't want to bore you all, but there's a advanced encryption standard. That's actually why it's so, it's kind of like a handshake between the two pieces of hardware. That's why that's so much more secure than the older versions of WPA. Not that you necessarily need to know this, there's no quiz afterwards, but just noting that there's some additional pieces in place that actually help make it more secure. So we talked about the difference in WPA2 specifically, that there is a residential, and then there is what we call enterprise versions of each. The home side uses PSK, which is like a pre-shared key. So basically all it is a bunch of random characters or a phrase. I know that Comcast is really big in phrases or like a sentence, a full sentence. If you set these up yourself, you're going to want to make them as long as possible. The longer they are, the harder they are to crack. So your pre-shared key, so if you're at home, let's say don't use your address, don't use your phone number, don't use your name, none of those things, but make it something obscure, like the Red Fox at dawn 2202. I don't know, just made that up. Would be a perfect key, and then write it down somewhere. So the people that are coming over or just your devices are on this network, and you know that your key is long and you have it documented, so that way, you're adding devices, you're able to do that quickly. The enterprise version is for those of you folks that are a part of a corporation, part of a company, and perhaps you use Active Directory, which is how you log into your computers. You generally would have a domain controller. Again, try not to bore you with too much technical jargon here, but what you can essentially do is hook your Wi-Fi network up to talk to your computers. So it's basically using your same credentials that you use to get onto the computer to actually access the internet. All right, so that has to do with your keys. Perfect. So now your SSID, which is also known as your name. So you probably have seen some people out there, maybe your neighbors, all have different names being broadcast. Some of them are funny. A lot of them are inappropriate. Those are my kind of people. So that name is customizable. And we get a lot of questions of what should we make our name, both in the corporate side and on the residential side. And my best advice to you, actually in any time, is make this name not match, like let's say your neighbor's name. Let's say they're Wi-Fi 1. You don't want to make your name Wi-Fi 1 as well, because what will happen is your devices will say, oh, I know what that network is, so I'm going to try to join it, but it could be your neighbor's, and then it'll jump back to yours. It just causes problems. Make it unique. However, don't make it identifiable to you. I've been over to people's houses, friends and family especially, that they make it like the Johnson's Family Network, and I tell them that's generally not a good idea. Just make it obscure enough, and maybe make it an initial, make it a phrase, something like that, or just make it numbers. There's nothing that says you can't do that. Reason being, so let's say you're a dentist's office, a small dentist office, and like Honey Orthodontics in Gurney. If you made it Dr. Honey or something like that, people are going to be able to identify your name and try to attack you. It's not an uncommon thing nowadays to have anybody out there just sniffing to see what they can get at and try to crack certain networks to see what data they can get into. Also, you can consider hiding your name. This isn't always a surefire bet. it makes setup maybe a hair different, a bit more difficult for you to actually go in because you have to tell your computer what the name is. So when it reaches out, it knows that it's not broadcasting, and it's constantly looking to make that handshake and make that connection. The other thing that we get asked a lot is about guest networks. Love guest networks. However, there's different types of guest networks that we need to really talk about. And really, the reason why you want to do this, you want to protect your personal and your company data in the corporate environment. Or if you have a home network, you want to protect your computers from anything that anybody's bringing over. Let's say you have, kids in the family, and maybe their friends are coming over with their laptops to, study, whatever. You don't necessarily want them to be able to infect all the rest of the computers on your network if they had something. So it's a good idea just to set up that guest network. That way you say, okay, you join my guest network. Not that I don't like you, it's just that I don't trust the devices that you brought into my house. But the same thing happens in the corporate world. You want to say, I want to protect the assets that I have, that I know that I'm maintaining, and everybody else goes onto this guest network. And you can make those passwords maybe a little bit easier to guess, but not super easy. Okay, kind of the same premise exists from what we just talked about with the actual passwords and making them long, things like that. But you can maybe ease up because you know that it's not going to personally come at you. I do think it's a really good idea to still have a password on your guest network, because a lot of people don't understand that, especially in the corporate world, that whomever owns that internet is liable for the traffic on it. Okay, let that sink in. Let's say you're a company, you have a guest Wi-Fi setup, everybody has the password, right? Or let's say you have an open guest network. Great, awesome. But then all of a sudden your neighbor's doing something illegal on your internet. Guess who's liable? Guess who the police or the FBI will come talk to? It's not going to be your neighbor that's using your Wi-Fi. It's going to be you. And the explanation of I have a guest network that's open, you may be able to get out of some of the liability of it, but it's easier just to put a password on it and just not give that password out to everybody, especially those neighbors. Don't trust those neighbors. It's also a good practice to actually change your passwords from time to time. That's actually not on this slide, but changing your password will help keep those people that have maybe visited you in the past, when they come back, unless you want their devices to be auto-found, from being able to get onto your guest network or use some bandwidth that you're currently using. In most corporate environments, you can set up bandwidth limiters. So what these do is they kind of just throttle the individual. So it's kind of like putting a rev limiter on your kid's car so they can't go over 65. Great, that's awesome. I don't want to have to think about my 16-year-old driving 75 down regular streets because their car is set to not allow them to do so. Segmentation is, I like to tell people, it's like giving people a party room. It's basically like, you do what you want in that room, and I know I'm good, but your party room, you can destroy it because it's not going to matter. It's not going to affect anything else. Most routers will let you do this, most modern routers, and there's a lot of talk in the tech world about putting your Internet of Things devices. So Internet of Things, IoT. Internet of Things, IoT, it's like your Alexas, your smart switches. You put those on your guest network, and if they had a problem, let's say Amazon, all the Alexa devices got hacked one day, you wouldn't have to worry about somebody coming into your network and infecting all of your computers with whatever's there. So I generally tell people it's a good idea, depending on how good of a router you have, is whether or not you're able to do this segmentation and how deep you can actually make the segmentation. Some routers, whether that being on the corporate side or the consumer side, a lot of them will allow you to have more than one guest network, which is amazing too. So you can have different rules for different networks. So you can actually have, a true guest network where it's people coming over to your house, but maybe all your IoT devices go onto their own guest network. So they all can talk because they are pretty noisy on the network. They all talk to each other quite a bit. And to be honest, you don't know what data is being collected by those IoT devices either. They're probably curious on where your traffic's going. And if you put them on their own guest network, guess what? You have a party room, they all can party together, and you don't have to worry about them trying to party with any of the devices that you have. Okay, company guest networks. I know I talked about some of these things. There is a whole thought process behind actually making your network, your Wi-Fi, either not offering it whatsoever or not giving access to any other devices on your network. Basically, all you're giving out is access to the internet. It would potentially save quite a bit of a headache if you don't need it, why have it on? Especially access to the internal devices, or if you have servers or any network equipment that you don't want somebody into. Because the attackers, if they were to get in, let's say they are able to hack your Wi-Fi, if this device doesn't even have access to get anywhere on your network, it just has access to the internet, what did they get? They didn't actually get anything from you. You're just like, oh, here's your prize, you get access to the internet. That's it. So the company guest networks, we actually tend to recommend that you set up multiple guest networks as well. Your standard guest network. Let's say you have somebody coming in doing a presentation for your board or something like that. Standard guest network, perfect one to put it onto. Staff phones. If you happen to run the company, or you're one that makes decisions, putting the staff's phones onto a network makes sense, because phones, they use a lot of data, but they don't necessarily need to use a lot of your data. So you can do bandwidth filtering or bandwidth limitations on those networks. So that way you don't have somebody that bought a new iPhone and they decided to do a backup while they're at work. Instead of killing your internet, where they're going to be bringing down multiple gigs onto your network, you can limit on how fast it's going to work. Staff personal computers. Now with people working remote more and more, we see personal computers coming into the corporate world. So putting these onto a different network totally makes sense. And then secure no LAN. We call this the least privileged network. It's basically, if you don't need access to LAN local area network, so that's kind of your computers, your servers, any storage devices, that's what we'd prefer that you would do on that one too. Implementation of filtering. Okay, so what is filtering? We can actually look at where the traffic's going, and we can say things that shouldn't be in a corporate world, like pornography, any hate speech, stuff like that. You can actually filter almost all of those websites down and just basically say, yeah, don't do this on your own time. Just remember, it's really important. Liability still lands on the company. So if you have somebody, an individual doing something illegal at work, that liability still falls on you. So if you have somebody that's doing movie sharing or they're torrenting of some sort, you need to be careful as the company owner, as even just an employee, that liability still exists for the company. And Comcast is really good about sending nastygrams if they see inappropriate traffic on your network. If they see you going to download, movies that you shouldn't be downloading, or going to, pirate stuff, they're going to come after you. And, it's not just Comcast. There's FBI will be involved. There's all kinds of good guys out there that are monitoring for these things. All right, so this is going to be a little bit more technical, but I'm going to try to just explain it in a way that makes sense. A lot of individuals, whether that's on the corporate or the customer side, like individual side, ask us about, I'm looking at this router and it says that it's got dual band or tri-band or quad band. Which one's the best? And I found this, and I'll tell you, I didn't actually come up with this all myself. I kind of rewrote it here a little bit. Think of the router bands like having more lanes on your road, okay? So single band, it's a one-lane road. So if you have a lot of congestion on there, you only have one lane. You're trying to imagine the sides of each side of this lane of this road are cliffs, sheer cliffs. They just drop off to nowhere. You probably don't want to have a single lane and have traffic trying to go back and forth because, I've been to Jamaica on a road that was a single lane and there was a sheer cliff. It wasn't comfortable. Okay. So things slow down, but you look at dual band, that's like driving on 31 in between McHenry and Crystal Lake. Okay. Traffic, two-way. It goes pretty quick, but we've all been in that scenario where it gets jammed up. The tri-band and the quad band, that's like you're starting to get to more like going on 90 towards Chicago. The more lanes you have there, the more freely the traffic can just move and move faster. So just a little tip here. If you are in a residential environment and you are looking to buy a new router, at least get a tri-band. The quad bands, they're a little bit more expensive, probably not super necessary, but the tri-bands, trust me, they will, you'll notice a huge increase in your speeds and you'll really appreciate it. A lot of the corporate routers though are still coming in dual band, okay? Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They are more expensive than the residential side, but they have ways to make things faster as well. So on the residential side, tri-band, buy it, love it. Okay, let's talk about free public Wi-Fi. Just say no. I should just stop it right here on this slide. Just say no. You don't want to join Starbucks Wi-Fi. You don't want to go to a hotel and join their free Wi-Fi because, it's great. I get to check emails. There's so many different attacks that happen on these free public Wi-Fis. I put what some of these are. Man in the middle. Basically, there's devices out there, not expensive to buy. I plug it in anywhere that has internet, right? I plug it in or I broadcast, I can hotspot from my device and basically have this thing distribute. Free public Wi-Fi, join here. And you'd be surprised at how many people join it. And all that does is it gives them the opportunity to intersect all the traffic that's going out through them. So they get free text, they get to read everything, unencrypted traffic. If you've been on a website, there's not the little, lock in the upper left, that's unencrypted traffic. If it's got the open lock, they can potentially read anything that you're doing there. Session hijacking, this one's really scary. Basically what they do is they sniff out just your connection. Let's say you have like an intranet at work or something. And what they can do is intersect that and then join to that intranet as you. It's simple. It's not a difficult thing to do. And then all of a sudden they're navigating everything as you. Malware distribution, if your computer doesn't have a firewall or something like that, basically what they will do is they will see if they can send you malware. And if your computer accepts it, I'm sorry. You probably should have had a firewall on if you're on free public Wi-Fi, or they're going to try to steal any information that they possibly can. Just say no. Tether to a hotspot on like your phone, something like that, or just don't use it when you're out and about. In a pinch, I would say the only way that I would even feel slightly okay about this, and really it's not okay, would be using a full-blown VPN somewhere else to try to protect yourself. But I'll tell you, it might not work. Just don't use them. Okay. All right. So if you're going to buy a new router and you're at home, most corporate environments are already set up in mesh networks. Mesh, what does that mean? Most people have run into a repeater in their day, right? A repeater is like, oh, I don't have Wi-Fi that's really good at this side of my house, so I'm going to buy this repeater, plug it in, and hope that it gives me better coverage further down. Well, mesh networks all broadcast the same name. Okay, pretty common in the corporate world, coming into being more popular on the residential side. And basically, what it does is it broadcasts one name, and it is all of your bands are actually then being broadcast that exact same name. So no more, Eric's Home Network 2.4 or 5. It's just Eric's Home. It removes the need of repeaters. And I actually have a couple of examples as I go further down, and I realize I need to speed up a little bit to ensure that you're getting mesh networks and that can be expanded. And that's what is beautiful about them. As you start to expand your mesh networks, you just buy another mesh access point, and boom, you plug it in, and generally they sync together really easily. We get asked a lot of questions. What things interfere with Wi-Fi? Metal roofs. Oh my gosh, so many warehouses out there have metal roofs, and I can't tell you how much they just kill the Wi-Fi from being distributed. Insulation, windows covering. So if you have, let's say you're in a building and you have certain acrylic things to keep the UV rays out, it also kills the Wi-Fi. If you have really big concrete walls, that'll do it as well. Microwaves are terrible. Lights, LEDs, compact fluorescents, or just regular fluorescent lights, they have a little ballast in the inside of them, and they tend to mess with Wi-Fi. And then the other things that can interfere is distance and location. Maybe you have Wi-Fi that you're broadcasting it in the upstairs and you're trying to get it downstairs. For whatever reason, in our experience, we find that Wi-Fi doesn't like to travel down; it likes to travel up. So we tend to tell people, put it in the main central area in your house or in the basement. Tends to work better. So routers we like. Residential side. So if you're in the market, the Google Wi-Fi is pretty solid. If you don't like Google, my personal favorite actually is the Netgear Orbi. I tend to recommend this one quite a bit. It's a tri-band. You can get a dual band, but I recommend the tri-band. They're not overly expensive. I mean, most people ask me, well, how much should I be spending? You're probably going to spend anywhere from $200 to $300 on a good mesh network, depending on how many different radios you need, different repeaters or APs. So the Eero was just bought by Amazon. So believe it or not, their new alarm actually has the Eeros built in. It's pretty cool technology. You'll see them quite a bit around and about. All of these can be bought on Amazon. A new one that's coming into the world here is the TP-Link Deco. Believe it or not, TP-Link, it's a relatively inexpensive company. They do a lot of smart switches and things like that, but they also do quite a bit in the technology sector that I live in. And we have a couple of our guys that actually have the TP-Link Decos. For $200, you can't really beat what they're giving you. You get some pretty cool features. The Asus Zen Wi-Fi gets really high marks, really high regards, and we do like this one as well. All right, so if you're a company, commercial wireless access points that we like, we are primarily a Meraki shop or a Cisco AirNet shop. Those are kind of our 1 and 2. These both need subscriptions. Technically, the AirNets don't, but you're going to need there's some things that Cisco wants you to have on there to make sure that you're getting updates. The HP Arubas. Arubas are perfect. A lot of companies use the Ubiquiti Pros. I would say stay away if you're in the commercial side. Don't get the Ubiquiti standard. I think like the residential grade ones. The Pros have more features that you're going to need in order to make sure that your company continues to run. The Linksys business class are also pretty solid. Linksys was here for a long time, went away, and now they're starting to make a pushback. Linksys was bought by Cisco many years ago, so you're getting maybe a little bit of their lower end but still quality hardware. Oh, right on time? Right on time. Any questions?
Thank you, Eric. We just had one question. Should you get a new router after a certain amount of time? Would that cause connectivity issues, or what's your opinion on that? Do they go bad?
So just to keep up with new standards, I would say if it's over 5 years old, it's time for a new device. If you're still using the all-in-one router modem that Comcast gave you, it may be time for a new one as well. Even on the commercial side, you need to have a replacement plan in place for all of these devices. They do have useful life, but they'll continue to run generally, but you're not going to have the same standards. You're not going to have the same level of security that you would get with, a newer device.
Okay. We have one additional question. How do you know how many bands your Orbi has?
Ooh. You would usually take a look at the make and model of your Orbi. And once you looked at your make and model, you could then just do a search on Google. That's probably your easiest way I don't think they have it written right on there. They may have it written on the Orbis. And actually, that's a good question. If you send Rachel or I a message, whoever had that question, we can even give you some assistance. How many bands you have.
Great. Well, it looks like that was all the questions we had, and we're right 1 minute over. So we will go ahead and let everyone go. We will have our next Tech Talk on Wednesday, the second Wednesday of March 9th at 11:30, the same time. So watch for that in your emails to register for that as well. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you.